What if the things that keep blocking you, the same fear, the same pain, the same relationship patterns, aren't random at all? What if you were the one chosen in your family to break the generational cycles, the trauma, the abandonment, the silence, and nobody ever told you? I'm not talking about being special or chosen in some dramatic way. I'm talking about patterns and what happens when one person becomes conscious enough to stop passing them on. For a long time, this kind of struggle can feel incredibly confusing. Like, you try to do the work, you reflect, you read, you change environments, you try to choose different people, and then somehow you're back in the same emotional classroom where the same themes keep showing up. The same triggers, the same internal conflicts, the same kind of dynamics, just with a different face. And when you can't see the logic behind this, it kind of starts feeling personal, like you're being cursed or you're behind, or like life is punishing you for something. And this is where most people get stuck. What changed everything for me was this. When trauma is not healed, it does not disappear. It reorganizes, it adapts, it changes form, and it's moving through generations, not always as a story that we remember, but as patterns we keep living again and again. Ways of relating, ways of surviving. What the nervous system learned was safe, even if it's hurtful to you and others around you. And very often, one person in the lineage is born with a task, consciously or not, of stopping it from going any further. One pattern I've noticed across many family systems is what looks like abandonment. Relationships ending suddenly, kids growing up without consistent emotional or physical presence. And the easy conclusion is abandonment is the problem. But usually abandonment is the outcome. It's not the cause. Underneath it is often avoidance, emotional unavailability that formed as protection when intimacy once carried the risk of rejection or harm. In many family systems, closeness becomes dysregulating, and nervous system reads intimacy as danger, not as connection or love. That's why when connections deepen, pulling away rather than staying feels safer, usually without conscious awareness. Healing these patterns can be extremely confusing because it's not about finding the right person so you won't be left. No. Healing these patterns often means becoming the one who does not leave. It's learning how to stay when connection deepens, learning how to tolerate intimacy, learning how to repair instead of running away, learning how to stay emotionally available, not perfectly, but consistently. Because otherwise, the nervous system keeps repeating the same cycle with the same ending, abandoning or pushing away other people before they get a chance to abandon you, all while believing that it's keeping you safe. Now, I want to say this with compassion because these patterns form very early and they are protective. Avoidance is not a character flaw. In many cases, it's a trauma response that was learned and passed along across the family system. It is a strategy that once kept someone safe, but if it goes unexamined, it can keep creating the same scenarios for decades or even generations, creating the same vicious cycle that is extremely hard to break. Another pattern I've seen, and I'm not saying this is everyone, but it's common, is women inheriting a story of endurance. When a mother carried everything, then a grandmother carried everything and everyone in the family. It's a lineage of women who stayed and tolerated under reciprocity and settled for less than they deserved, and then got left usually holding the entire life. Sometimes it can literally mean women raising children alone because the man left, or sometimes being emotionally alone while still technically physically together. And over time, the nervous system learns, I can't rely on anyone. I'll handle it myself. And while on the outside it can look like strength, inside it can actually become some kind of quiet resignation, as if love is something that you survive, not something that holds you. And if this pattern keeps repeating in someone's life, it's not a personal failure, it's a pattern fidelity. Because the system keeps choosing what's familiar, even when familiar hurts. And here's where it gets interesting though. Sometimes lineages don't repeat trauma. Sometimes they try to correct it. And this is what I've seen in my family in a way that is honestly kind of striking. In the most recent generation, there is a pattern of men stepping into fatherhood with children that are not biologically theirs, marrying women who already have kids and adopting them, choosing responsibility and becoming the stable figure. Now, I'm not saying this in a way, look at us, how good we are. No, I'm saying this to show how the system can try to correct the pattern or heal the old wound. It's like as if the entire lineage is saying, we stay, we step in, we don't run away when things get real. And I think that could be part of the reason why I always felt to adoption even when I was a kid, because this is literally what I witnessed as a child in my own family. Now, sometimes even corrective patterns have shadows. Sometimes responsibility replaces the desire. Sometimes caretaking replaces the mutuality. Sometimes doing the right thing can actually replace naming the real emotional needs. So even the good or corrective patterns sometimes can carry some unfinished work. And this is the moment where I want to name something very carefully without inflating it, because when people hear the phrase the cycle breaker, it can start to sound like a personality badge, but it's not. Usually it's just a pattern, a set of markers that you start noticing that you can no longer unsee. And across psychology, religious texts, and family systems, these markers show up again and again. So cycle breakers usually experiencing some form of rupture, role rupture, being the first one in your family to do something that no one has ever done before, geographic rupture, immigration, exile, living what's familiar, visibility rupture, speaking, creating, publishing, and being visible. And usually that feeling of loneliness, the question, why does my life feel so different from anyone else? Not because you're better, not because you're worse, but just because you're seeing patterns you can no longer unsee. And you can't keep living the way those who came before you lived. And what is interesting, this is not just a psychological idea. The Bible is essentially a collection of stories about people who were asked to leave what was familiar, to leave their land, the family systems, to step away from inheritance and into uncertainty. And again, the pattern was rupture. One of the earliest stories is the one of Abraham, when he was told to leave his land, his country, his family, his father's household, and go somewhere unknown, the promised land. I remember when I heard the story for the first time, something stopped me. I was thinking, wait a second, this pattern feels familiar. I could recognize the archetype that showed up across various systems, psychological, ancestral, and spiritual. So when people find themselves living these ruptures, moving, living, becoming visible, stepping out from inheritance, it usually means that they're standing at a point in the system where something old can no longer continue the way it was. And Once you see that, it is very hard to go back pretending like you don't. For me, one of the core patterns or programs, visibility is not safe. Across generations in my family, I heard the same message from my dad, my mom, my grandparents, different people, the same program. And if I were to translate that from my native language to English, it would mean be quieter than water and lower than grass. Now, if you didn't grow up with language like that, let me translate the nervous system meaning. It basically means do not stand out, do not draw attention, do not say too much. Because visibility does not put just you at risk. In the past, it could endanger entire families. In places shaped by repression, silence wasn't personal, it was collective protection. And for a long time, I couldn't understand why I had such intense fear around being visible, speaking publicly and sharing my thoughts, while at the same time being deeply called to do exactly that. Like it wasn't even optional. I felt that immense contradiction until I looked at what my lineage actually lived through. War, repression, survival, unspoken loss, unspoken truths. There were people in my lineage who were killed during World War II. Some of them were partisans. So speaking up, resisting, and being visible wasn't just brave, it was dangerous. And it could cost lives, not just one, but many. And then I was born in a place where, ironically, speaking up and standing for freedom wasn't neutral. There were real consequences. So fear wasn't irrational, it was inherited logic. And silence wasn't a flaw, it was protection. Once I saw that, my story changed. Because I understood that I wasn't just a shy and introverted person. I could no longer hide behind that. It was actually a survival code. And it explained many things that used to confuse me previously. For example, why I started a YouTube channel 5 years ago and then deleted it when it got exposed during a work meeting. I actually share more about that in another video, and I'll share a link below. So people might assume, well, she just got embarrassed. But it's much deeper than that. If you've never dealt with primal fear, it is really hard to explain what it feels like exactly. For me, it felt like I was dying in the moment because my body interpreted being seen as being in danger. It was interpreted as a real threat, very similar to what anxious systems feel when attachment feels unstable, or avoidance systems when intimacy or closeness increases. But here's the part that really matters. Breaking the cycle doesn't mean to force yourself to become fearless. It means to teach your body that visibility, or whatever pattern you're working with, is no longer dangerous, even though your body or nervous system might still think it is. It means choosing consciously and naming patterns without reenacting them. And for me personally, it means speaking where generation stayed quiet and letting myself to be seen without disappearing. When you don't understand the pattern, life feels cruel. But when you understand the lineage, something shifts. What used to feel like punishment now looks like instruction or manual. The same lesson repeats, not to break you, not to punish you, but to bring something into awareness, as many times as needed for you to finally notice and choose differently. And here's a line that I keep coming back to. When one person in the lineage becomes conscious of a pattern, the work stops being personal. It becomes ancestral. And I want to say this because it matters. There were long stretches in my life where I couldn't see what any of this was for. Like, growth didn't feel like growth. It just felt extremely hard, like I could barely make it. And if you're in that place right now, I want you to do just one simple thing. Look back and notice how you can handle things now that used to completely overwhelm you. Notice how you can speak your needs, even imperfectly, and how you can pause before reacting. How you can start over without hating yourself for it. That is growth, even if it doesn't feel dramatic while you're inside. So if you're feeling blocked in a specific area of your life, here's a place to start. First, identify the loop and ask yourself, what is being repeated and where? Where do you keep ending up even with different circumstances? Then zoom out 1 or 2 generations and ask, what were my parents or grandparents afraid of? What did they normalize? What was never spoken about? What did they have to do to survive? And then ask a different question. Not what's wrong with me, but what was this pattern protecting my family from, and does it still need to? And that question alone can change everything. Understanding these patterns isn't just about healing the past. It directly affects what we pass forward. That's why the idea of family and children feels so serious to me, because kids don't just learn what we tell them. They learn what we embody, and they learn what they observe. How parents talk to each other, how repair happens and whether it happens at all, how conflict is being resolved, whether it is safe to express what you feel and how you feel, whether love feels conditional, whether it is safe to be yourself, whether silence is being used as punishment or manipulation, whether anyone comes back and says, "I'm sorry, let's talk, let's repair." It takes 2 people willing to do the work. 2 nervous systems learning regulation, emotional capacity, conflict resolution, and secure way of relating. 2 people willing to repair instead of withdraw. Staying instead of stonewalling, and speaking instead of disappearing. Healing generational trauma does not mean perfection. It means presence, communication, repair, and emotional safety. Because this world already has enough pain and enough unhealed nervous systems hurting themselves and others. That's why if breaking the cycle means one less soul to be traumatized or broken during the process, that matters. That's why I would much rather not have children and family at all than pass along the trauma that I have not healed, or I won't be willing to heal, or bring them into a dynamic where no one wants to do the work. The world is already challenging enough. So if you feel like your life looks different from everyone in your family, if you feel pulled toward growth that feels lonely, unfamiliar, and even too much, if your path does not make sense until you zoom way out, you might not be lost. You might be the one. And I know it's heavy because being a cycle breaker is not a flattering title, a cute personality, identity, or a badge of honor. It is work, messy and hard. But it's also freedom, because the moment you can name the pattern, you're no longer trapped inside it. You don't have to fix everything at once. Awareness alone already changes the direction. And the work, as hard as it is, changes much more than just your life. It changes what and who comes after you. So it's kind of worth it.